Midlife is not a crisis, Jung once wrote. It's a summons from the self. At some point after 40, a strange silence begins to grow inside. Not the peace of contentment, but the silence of disorientation. It can come after a divorce, after the children leave, after a promotion, or after nothing at all. A woman wakes up one morning and realizes she no longer recognizes the life she built. A man sits in traffic and wonders how he ended up in a life he never consciously chose. And in that quiet space, something ancient begins to stir. This isn't depression, it's not failure, it's the soul revolting quietly against the life shaped by external expectations. They don't talk about this part at school, or at therapy, or on social media, but Jung did. He said that the first half of life is about building the ego, but the second half is about meeting the self. Wholly unprepared, he wrote, we take the step into the afternoon of life. And worse still, we take this step with the false presupposition that our truths and ideals will serve us as they did in the morning. But they don't. They crack, they collapse, and in the ruins, something sacred waits. This video is for those who have reached that threshold, who have heard the whisper, you can't keep living like this. It's for the ones who feel lost, not because they've failed, but because they've outgrown their old identity. This is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. In the next 30 minutes, we will follow a symbolic journey through Jung's map of individuation, tailored for the second half of life. You will learn why the pain you feel is not personal, but archetypal. How to begin a daily practice of shadow work and dream dialogue, what it means to confront your emotional complexes and free yourself, and how over 30 days you can begin a sacred return to your purpose. No gimmicks, no fake motivation, just the deep work of becoming whole, even now. Especially now, because after 40 you don't need more goals. You need meaning, you need truth, you need soul. The great turning, the myth of the second half of life. They called it a midlife crisis. Jung called it a turning point in the soul's journey, a threshold between who we were and who we're meant to become. Most people spend the first 40 years of life climbing a ladder: career, family, status, survival. The world teaches them how to build, how to achieve, how to succeed. But no one teaches them what to do when the ladder no longer leads anywhere that feels meaningful. This is where the second half of life begins. Not at 40, not at 50, but at the moment when the outer life no longer matches the inner truth. Carl Jung believed that aging was not a descent, but a spiral inward. While modern culture celebrates youth, achievement, and speed, Jung honored depth, soul, and silence. He saw life not as a straight line, but as a cycle. In the morning of life, we become someone. In the afternoon, we learn how to become whole. We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning, he wrote, for what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. To the ego, this turning feels like death. The goals no longer excite. The roles no longer fit, the mask starts to slip. But to the self, the true hidden center of the psyche, this collapse is liberation. It is the invitation to individuation, the deep psychological process of becoming fully yourself. This journey isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about recovering what was forgotten, the childlike wonder, the creative impulse, the ancestral wounds, the spiritual hunger. Jung observed that many of his patients over 40 were suffering not from clinical pathology, but from meaninglessness. They had done everything right and still felt empty. They weren't sick. They were awakening. The archetypes that ruled the first half of life, the hero, the warrior, the achiever, begin to fade, and new, older archetypes start to rise: the sage, the healer, the hermit, the butterfly. This metamorphosis is often triggered by external change, a loss, a divorce, a diagnosis, a betrayal, but the deeper cause is internal. It's the self calling from beneath the persona. Enough pretending, it's time to remember who you really are. In mythology, the turning point is the call to adventure. In life, it often feels like falling apart, but falling apart is necessary for reintegration. The ego must crack for light to enter. You may have done everything society asked of you, and now the soul is asking for something else. You may not know where to begin, but the truth is, you've already begun, because you're here, you're listening, and some part of you knows there is more to life than surviving it. This is the myth of the second half of life, not a crisis, a rite of passage. If this message resonates with you, subscribe now. This channel is a sanctuary for those answering the soul's call after 40. The encounter with the shadow. What have you avoided? Until now. There comes a moment when running no longer works. The distractions lose their flavor. The masks grow heavy. And the shadows, the ones we've ignored, buried, denied, begin to whisper. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds everything we refuse to face, not just our darkness, but our repressed brilliance, not just our anger or shame, but also our instincts, creativity, sensuality, grief, and unclaimed power. The shadow isn't evil, it's unintegrated, it's the psychic basement of the self. And after 40, the doors begin to creak open. The reason is simple. The persona we crafted to survive the first half of life no longer serves the deeper truth emerging within. Many people feel haunted in midlife, not by ghosts, but by dreams, regrets, emotional patterns, things they never healed, decisions they avoided, parts of themselves they silenced to fit in, be strong, or get ahead. But here's the truth Jung taught. What we do not face will return, not as punishment, but as invitation. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. That's why shadow work is not optional in individuation. It is essential. So how do we begin? The process doesn't start with therapy or books. It starts with radical honesty. And one of the most profound tools for this is simple, a shadow journal. This is not a place to write pretty thoughts. It's a place to confess, to remember, to feel. In it, you write the things you've never said aloud, the roles you've played that no longer feel true, the anger you hide behind politeness, the grief you buried to be strong, the desires you were told were too much. You begin to listen to dreams, even the uncomfortable ones. You track repeated emotional triggers and ask, what part of me is trying to speak through this pain? You stop seeing your reactions as flaws and start seeing them as messages from within, from the shadow. This work is not easy. It will challenge everything the ego built, but it is sacred because in the shadow lives not just our wounds, but our medicine. The part of you that was shamed for being too emotional might be the healer. The part that was punished for dreaming too big might be the visionary. The anger you were taught to suppress might be your buried power. After 40, you don't need to keep running from these parts. You need to reclaim them. Shadow work isn't about perfection. It's about presence, about being with what is real, raw, and unresolved, without judgment. You will cry, you will resist, you will want to give up, but you will also remember. And in remembering, you begin to return to yourself. This is the second step in the journey of individuation, not to be good, not to be liked, but to be whole. Complexes. Who's really driving your life? You think you're in control, that your decisions are rational, that your emotions are yours. But what if you're not the one at the wheel? What if, underneath your everyday thoughts and behaviors, there are autonomous psychic entities that hijack your reactions, warp your relationships, and shape your entire identity without you even noticing? Carl Jung called them complexes, emotional knots tied long ago, usually in childhood but still alive, still active, still whispering in the background of your adult life. A complex isn't just a memory, it's an energy cluster, a repeating emotional pattern charged with intense feelings, beliefs, and images. You know you've touched a complex when your reaction feels bigger than the situation. You suddenly become a younger version of yourself. You feel possessed, unable to stop a behavior even when you know better. For example, you're criticized at work and you shut down like you did at age 10 when your father yelled at you. A friend cancels plans and you're flooded with a familiar abandonment panic. You try to rest, but a voice inside calls you lazy, echoing your overachieving mother. These aren't random emotional outbursts, they are complexes in motion. And here's the haunting part. Until you make them conscious, they will continue to shape your life, your relationships, your self-worth, your purpose, without your permission. Everyone knows nowadays that people have complexes, Jung said. What is not so well known, though far more important theoretically, is that complexes can have us. So how do we take the wheel back? The first step is tracking. You start noticing your emotional spikes, your recurring triggers, your irrational behaviors. You treat them not as flaws, but as portals. Begin a practice called the emotional timeline. On paper, map out major emotional reactions in your adult life, recurring conflicts in relationships, moments where you felt taken over. Then ask, when did I first feel this way? Whose voice is echoing in this reaction? What story am I reliving? This process transforms your life from a blur of reactivity into a field of symbolic messages. Each complex, when explored, reveals a core wound, usually formed in early attachment, a core belief, e.g., I'm not enough, I must be perfect to be loved. A protective behavior that became a prison. You begin to realize you're not too sensitive. You're carrying an emotional map that was never updated. You're not overreacting. You're re-experiencing a forgotten pain. But now, unlike in childhood, you can bring consciousness. You can pause. You can breathe. You can choose. This is the power of individuation in the second half of life. The ability to name the forces inside you and integrate them, not banish them. Because behind every complex is a sacred message, a forgotten part of the self. A younger you that wasn't held or heard or seen, now you become the one who holds them. If you're starting to connect the dots, don't stop here. Subscribe to stay on this path. We're only just beginning to unearth the soul beneath the ego. Purpose is not a goal. It's a calling. Somewhere along the way, the word purpose was hijacked. It became another item on the to-do list, another mountain to climb, another goal to chase. But Jung saw it differently. He didn't see purpose as something you create with effort, but something you remember through silence. After 40, a quiet question begins to echo through the psyche. What am I really here for? Not in a career sense, not in a legacy sense, but in the most intimate soul-level sense. Why was I born? And why now? And if you're listening carefully, the answer doesn't come from the ego. It comes from the self, the inner center of meaning, myth, and mystery. This is where the journey shifts. Because up until now, your life may have been built around survival roles. The provider, the caregiver, the achiever, the peacemaker. You performed, you sacrificed, you succeeded. But those roles, Jung said, are masks, personas. They help us adapt to the world, but they are not the fullness of who we are. Eventually, those masks crack. The applause fades. The titles lose their meaning. And something deeper calls. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung wrote, is to become who you truly are. But how? Not by brainstorming, not by grinding, but by listening to what Jung called the symbolic life. The self doesn't speak in spreadsheets or logic. It speaks in symbols, synchronicities, dreams, images, longings, and sensations. If you want to reconnect with your soul's purpose, you must enter a different kind of attention. Start with these 3 portals. 1. Dreams. Every night, your unconscious sends symbolic messages. They aren't random, they are mythological. Keep a dream journal. Look for recurring images, places, people. Ask, what part of me is this dream revealing or hiding? 2. Imaginative resonance. What myths, stories, or figures deeply move you? Is it the phoenix, the hermit, the wanderer, the healer? These archetypes aren't entertainment, they're reflections of your inner self. Follow your fascinations. They are breadcrumbs from the soul. 3. Inner stillness. Set aside time, even 10 minutes a day, for non-doing. Turn off the noise, let the silence speak. You may hear nothing, but over time an image, a phrase, or a feeling will emerge, not from your thoughts, but from something deeper. Purpose isn't always grand. It's often subtle, strange, slow. It may lead you to paint for no reason, to speak to trees, to study astrology, to write poetry again, to return to childhood dreams long abandoned. Whatever it is, it won't come from pressure. It will come from presence. Your vision will become clear, Jung said, only when you can look into your own heart. So stop asking, what should I do? Start asking, what is seeking expression through me now? Because purpose is not a job description. It's a response to the soul's call. It doesn't always make sense, but it always brings meaning. The 30-day ritual, a map for rebirth. Insight without embodiment is just another distraction. Jung didn't just want people to understand the psyche, he wanted them to live it. And after 40, transformation demands more than reflection. It asks for ritual, because rebirth isn't a concept, it's a process. A slow, sacred reorganization of the self, and like any rite of passage, it needs a container, a frame, a commitment. So what follows is a 30-day map, not to fix you, but to reintroduce you to yourself. Week 1, meeting the shadow daily practice, shadow journal. Focus, track emotional triggers. Write raw and unfiltered. Ask, what am I feeling that I don't want to feel? What am I pretending not to know? Evening prompt, recall your day. Where did you feel small, reactive, overwhelmed, or fake? Write it down. Sit with it. Don't judge. This week is about shining a light into the basement, not to clean it, but to know what's there. Week 2. Dialogue with the past. Daily practice. Complex timeline. Focus. Trace today's reactions back to earlier wounds. Map emotional memories across decades. Look for patterns. Ask, whose voice is in this reaction? What part of me froze in time? Symbolic act. Write a letter to your younger self, the one who first felt that wound. Don't analyze. Just speak from your soul. This week is for honoring your emotional inheritance and deciding what you no longer wish to carry. Week 3, reclaiming the self daily practice, morning silence, plus image tracking. Focus, start the day in stillness, 5-10 mins. Notice recurring images in dreams, daydreams, memories. Ask, what image or symbol is visiting me now? What wants to be born through me? Creative exercise. Create a soul collage or sketch. No art skills needed. Let the psyche speak in symbols. This week is about listening to what the ego cannot hear. Week 4. Initiation through action. Daily practice. Ritualized action. Focus. Choose one symbolic act per day. Small, intentional, and meaningful. Examples. Burn a letter you needed to write for years. Say no to something that drains you. Wear something that reflects who you really are. Begin a project your soul keeps whispering about. Culminating ritual. On day 30, choose a space. Nature, altar, candlelit room. Speak aloud. This is who I was. This is who I choose to become. Then symbolically cross a threshold, a doorway, a line in the sand, something physical to anchor the inner transformation. This week is about letting the invisible become visible through sacred action. This 30-day map isn't a challenge, it's a devotion. It doesn't require perfection, only presence. You will resist, you will forget. That's part of the process. But if you return, day by day you will feel it. The old shell cracking, the forgotten self awakening, the second half of life beginning, not with noise, but with meaning. If this ritual resonates, subscribe now. We'll keep walking this path together, one step, one symbol, one soul at a time. It's not too late, it's right on time. They told you it was too late. Too late to start over, too late to find yourself, too late to change. But Jung would say, that voice isn't truth. It's fear. Because the second half of life isn't a decline, it's an ascent, inward. You weren't meant to be the same person forever. You were meant to evolve, to unravel, to re-emerge, not as someone new, but as someone more whole. This journey you've taken, through shadow, through memory, through meaning, is not just psychological, it's spiritual. You've met the pieces of yourself you once avoided. You've seen how old emotions still steer your present. You've opened the door to the self, the wise center that holds your purpose. And most importantly, you've learned that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in patterns, in symbols, in rituals, in everyday moments that feel different because you are different. Maybe for the first time in years, you feel the stirrings of something sacred again. A desire to live not by default, but by design. Not to impress, but to express. Not to survive, but to feel deeply alive. So what now? Now you begin, not with pressure, but with presence. Keep journaling, keep listening to dreams, keep tracking the symbols that return again and again. They are the language of your soul. Speak to yourself kindly. Treat your inner life as sacred. Take small, strange, beautiful steps toward what feels true. And when it gets hard, because it will, remember Jung's words. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. You still have life to live, not just years, but soul. So live it. Live the unlived life, live the true life, live the life only you were meant to live, because it's not too late. It's right on time.